this NMRC now in place, who will be eligible to get a loan or to get mortgage?
Okay. Again, one of the things we've said over and over is that NMRC is going to bring down the interest rates, on mortgage loans. Yeah, so they're going to bring in long-term funding, as against what you have in the market today of loans being typically from between 5 years and maybe maximum of 10 to 15 years. You're going to have 20-year mortgages and above, right? So today, if you have a loan at a little over single digits, so it's going to be double digits, but the low end of double digits, yeah, for 20 years, we find that someone earning, say, 150,000 naira per month can buy a house worth 5 million naira. Someone earning 100,000 per month can buy a house worth 3 million naira. Someone even on minimum wage can buy a house of 500,000 naira, maybe a flat or a one-bedroom flat or something. Now, with the interest rates and the long tenors, this makes it, easy. So NMRC and these loans are for all classes of Nigerians, and with interest rate down, with the tenors longer, all of them will be able to afford it, even people on minimum wage.
All right. In as much as a lot of positive things have been said about the Mortgage Refinancing Corporation, but then some people express the fears that they hope this may not result to what happened, with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. What's your take on that? Okay,
again, if you bring in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, yeah, it is not the fact that they are government-sponsored entities that was the problem. It was the recklessness of the lenders, okay? So loans were being given with 0% interest rates, yeah? Now, immediately house prices reduce, you have sort of a negative equity in the loan. So if I have a house that I'm owing 300,000 on, and the house value is 200,000, people would likely walk away from those kind of mortgages, and that's what happened in that regard. In this case, loans are going to be originated with a minimum of 20% equity. So that gives a buffer, right? For the lower end of people, there's also going to be a credit guarantee scheme that NMRC is going to champion as well. So this won't happen like the government-sponsored entities. Then remember also that NMRC is a public-private partnership. It's not strictly public. So the government is only going to own about 33% of the company. The private sector is going to own the balance 67%. So it's going to run like a private sector company. It is a private sector company.
All right, Hakim, you have something to add to
that? I mean, just to further buttress that, I think part of the fears which have been expressed also to me is the fact that people think this would just be like the typical Nigerian attempt to solve this problem. But I've taken a very close look at the structure of the NMRC, and I've seen the fact that, if you look at the information memorandum, you'll see that the Federal Ministry of Finance is described as the sponsor, just the sponsor. But the bulk of the equity is going to be owned by private equity owners, commercial banks, insurance companies, and once you have private investors, they don't joke with their money. They are accountable to shareholders, and they will not allow the institution to run just like any other government institution. So you'll see that because it is private sector driven and private sector led, and if you look at the whole process, you'll see that the private sector will have been significantly involved in driving this, and we believe that with the right platform, and solving the other issues which I have mentioned, we should be able to begin to see the benefits of NMRC very soon. Now,
Nigeria's housing demand has been estimated at 11 million. How can I can see you shaking your head, give and take, perhaps. How can the establishment of this mortgage refinance help to bridge, this gap?
Okay, the first thing, we have a lot of figures, but the figure that I tend to believe is the one that says between 15 and 17 million housing units, because there are empirical studies which have been done. There's a major study that was done by Professor Mabogunje a few years ago. And when Professor Mabogunje says something, we tend to give it it tends to lend a lot of credence to that point. Now, there are two problems today. Number one is that we're not rolling out houses as fast as possible for so many reasons. We're still using traditional methods of construction. We're not deploying appropriate technology. We're still building with the typical way that we have always built. That's one major problem. The second problem is that developers, because they're not sure of offtake, you don't want to, even when you want to do what is today a large project, 500 houses, you do it in phases because you're not sure, but with NMRC, once you're sure of guaranteed offtake, they're able to go all out. You know that once you build, there's an institution that will provide liquidity for mortgage lenders to continue to lend to who will be buy. Because there are people who want to buy houses out there. You know, as long as there's an institution that will come to lend to would-be buyers, and you know there's an offtake, then it becomes easy for you as a developer to begin to make significant investments in technology, in modular technology. You can then roll out houses very fast. And like I mentioned earlier, the critical component of this NMRC program is also the housing construction industry, looking at the issue of volume, of quality, and of efficiency of housing delivery. You know, so I believe that once you have demand, you also deal with the supply end, you're able to roll out these houses. You know, and then progressively we can begin to, if you look at the minister's statement, it is estimated that it will deliver 75,000 homes annually. I believe that we can deliver much more than that once we have guaranteed offtake and we have funding to back it up.
So what size of mortgage do we really need, you know, to be written to, you know, meet Nigeria's housing needs, really?
Okay, again, I mean, remember that, like Kim has said, estimations say about 17 million deficit today. There's a difference between latent demand and effective demand. Okay, latent demand is I want to own a home, but the truth is, can I afford a home? Okay, so NMRC would deal with affordability, and that increases production. That's on the one hand. Second is, if we take our population today at about 170 million, growing at 3% per annum, we're adding about 5 million people every year, which means we require maybe additional 2 million houses every year. Okay, but if we work with what we have today, 20,000 houses at an average of 5 million naira, we would require 100 billion for that. Increase that to 200,000 houses, which the government is planning over the next 3 to 5 years. Then we would require 1 trillion for that, okay? So the first phase of this is to say, let's raise 1 trillion, put it in the housing market and get 200,000 houses up and running immediately. But you can again go to 2 million houses, which is 10 trillion. And then ultimately, if we wanted to do 20 million houses, which is more our deficit, we're talking about 100 trillion. These figures look mind-boggling, and these are prices at an average of 5 million. So that's where the mortgage.
All right, just before I get to know who will be disbursing these funds, let's take a short break. Well, we'll take a breather for now, and when we come back, we'll continue with that conversation. To stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and we're still looking at the housing sector, looking at the newly established Mortgage Refinancing Corporation and how it's going to enhance housing development in Nigeria. And I still have the two gentlemen here, Mr. Femi Johnson, the Chairman, Mortgage Banks Association of Nigeria, and Hakeem Oguniro. He's the CEO, UAC Property Development Company. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for sticking on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I said I wanted to know who would be disbursing these funds and at what rate.
Okay, the participating banks are mortgage banks and a few commercial banks. Okay, so you have most of the mortgage banks, if not all of them, participating in this scheme, and then you have a few commercial banks also participating. Those are the people that are going to be disbursing these funds. And at what rate? Okay, you wanted to
because it's important to stress, because there's a lot of misconception out there. The NMRC is only a vehicle to make the liquidity available for the retail bankers who will disburse for all disbursement to the lender, to the off-takers.
Okay. Now, an important component of NMRC is the development of mass housing, by private developers working with the Federal Mortgage Bank, I suppose. Yeah, and they will be, be done on a rent-to-own a model, So how can you explain that? How will that work?
Okay, basically when it comes to social housing, mass housing, I've always stressed that you need a collaboration of some sort to get that running, because it's difficult for developers if you have to buy land in the open market, go through your permission and approval in the usual way, borrow money from the bank at commercial interest commercial interest rate to deliver those sort of housing. So I guess that part of what is in the offering is also an attempt to create a platform whereby developers could work with government, whether at federal or state government level, whereby government provides the land. You create a separate window for approval and permitting, and you work with these developers to be able to deliver these houses at a much lower cost, such that rather than pay rent, the rent that you ordinarily will pay will go as part of the repayment for the capital value of the house, and in a matter of 25 to 30 years, you could become the owner of the house. And like you also, like Femi mentioned earlier, also because of the issue of housing microfinance issues, which is also part of this overall program, it becomes easier for you then to either start with a small house, because one of the problems with affordable housing is that I always give the example of South Africa, that when they started affordable housing, they started with 40 square meter homes, then they moved to 60 and then 80. So people have to understand we have to start small and then build on that into the future, so that we can have the kind of homes that people really want.
All right, just a quick one. Is there any policies you think that should be put in place to ensure that whatever that is set out to achieve through this initiative will be achieved?
Of course, again, we've spoken about land registries, we've spoken about, titling, we've spoken about governor's consent. There's also the issue of foreclosure, which is critical. If I lend and there's a default and I cannot take back the house, then there's a problem. Okay? So all these issues need to work together in order to get this to take off properly.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It's been an interesting one.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I've been speaking with Mr. Femi Johnson. He is the chairman, Mortgage Banks Association of Nigeria, and Mr. Hakeem Oguniro, CEO, USC Property Development Company. And we've been looking at the housing sector development, looking at the newly established Nigerian Mortgage Refinancing Corporation and how it's going to help in housing development in Nigeria.